Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Healthy Merps, sick ADWCTA. He is still sick. First
Yes.
update.
And on the bright side, I am going to be censoring all of my coughs. So you will not hear the coughs if you're listening to this on audio, which we did last time as well. And now, even on video, I'm going to mute myself. So hopefully
Yeah.
this will
Did
go
I get
smoother.
out all of the coughs? I tried to get out like almost all of them, like the obvious ones. But
Um, I took out. Were there any coughs left for you? Because I took out all of them that I could before I even sent it to you.
oh, or was this like 2 weeks ago or something? I don't remember. I remember I had to do no. You know what? That was a Boozer. I'm mistaking you for Boozer.
Oh, wow. It was Boozer
That
coughing?
was that was a while ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Although he wasn't coughing. It was just random like robotic noises.
Ah, okay.
But anyways, yes. So you're still sick. Hopefully you're better by next week.
Hopefully, this has been going on for long enough. But exciting news, exciting unannounced news by Blizzard. Blizzard put out the patch that we thought was going to rebucket everything, and they released pretty extensive like patch notes about what was going to happen with that patch and what's going to happen with the on October 17th with the dual classes arena. You know, a lot of good info, a lot of good things on the blog post, and zero mention of the rebucketing.
Yeah. So all right, guys. We have new buckets. Or some stuff was moved, but unfortunately, like if you remember the last time they released info, it was a huge step forward, right? They not only released info about buckets, like they gave us spreadsheets. It's like the first time they've ever given us spreadsheets. It's the first time they've ever been like, okay, for those of you who really want to know, this is it.
Yeah, they told us the
Um,
rules of the game, which they hadn't for
yeah,
like 2 years.
basically. And then we had to, like reverse engineer it, right?
Mhm.
But this time, no mention. And we know that stuff has moved. We know this stuff has moved, but it wasn't even like in previous patches where, we'd get a footnote, right? Or
Yeah,
like a one little bullet point. It's like Arena has changed. Something like that. Like something like that would have been just like,
it's like, by the
certain
way, we
cards were
did
rebucketed.
something. This is
Yeah,
more
yeah.
like, oh, this isn't even important enough to tell people that we did anything. But you know, all these minor, tiny changes, we're gonna like detail them out like completely because that affects everybody, and so that's important. But whereas if a change affects the entirety of the arena draft, it's just not important enough to tell people that anything's changed. They'll figure it out.
All right. So how do we even begin tackling it?
Well, we can begin tackling this on the number one question on everyone's mind, which shouldn't be a question, it should just be a statement, and that's where did Giggling Inventor move to? Is it now in the top half of the top bucket, being the best neutral card? Is it now in the second half of the top bucket, you know, along with Primordial Drake and all the other top premium cards? Is Blizzard still holding on to the idea that this is not an absolutely broken card and putting it into like the second bucket? It's in the bottom of the third bucket on release, and that when the bucketing came out, we contacted Blizzard, and it's the only card that we have ever in the history of the Lightforge and you know the Goat and everything ever contacted Blizzard about to be like, hey, just like before you do this, it's a huge mistake. Like just like move it like right now, please. We're not gonna do this with every card we disagree with, but this is one that's gonna have a really bad effect. Um, and you know, it all kind of worked out, right? Like in terms of us being right, and you know, Arena being heavily affected by Giggling Inventor. It's the number two most picked card in the game. It has one of the highest win rates of cards that are picked. It's clearly misbucketed, and Blizzard left it alone in its bucket for 2 months. As the Blizzard even bucketed two other neutral cards above Giggling Inventor. Anyway, it was a mess. The changes made to the arena before the release of all these new cards, you know, made arena a lot better. But this is definitely like a stark misbucketing. Zero people disagree with this. Zero people disagreed with it on day one of release. Zero people disagree with it now. And so finally, Blizzard has moved the buckets. Merps, where is
It has
Giggling Inventor now?
it has moved astronomically from the bottom of the third bucket to the bottom of the third bucket.
Wow.
Yes. So look, nothing's changed with Giggling Inventor. For those of you guys who wanted the meta to look a little bit different, to not lose to a card that is snap picked, no matter if you're control, mid range, or aggro, to a card that requires no setup and has huge swing potential just by you dropping it. Everything is the same. Giggling Inventor has not moved at all.
Yeah.
Other stuff has moved though. So we're gonna spend that time talking about the other stuff, definitely.
No.
But
We're gonna talk about Giggling Inventor
but
first, and
yeah,
first, what you want to know is what Blizzard is moving stuff based off of, right? Like they have all the data in the world, and they originally, when they first created the bucket system, they said it was going to be bucketed and moved based on win rates. Fine. Then, some time ago, when they were doing the rebucketing right before the Boomsday release, they said actually things were moving based on pick rates. Fine, right? Like these are all systems; they're objective. Blizzard has numbers, you know. They may not create the best meta or whatever, but at least it's something that you can kind of predict where things are moving, and you're never going to be like, "Oh, Blizzard, you're so stupid. Why did you do that?" Because it's all like based on numbers.
as long as you tell us, it's like this is how it's going to be changed. Like this is what the change is going to be based upon, and you follow through with it. I'm like, I might not like it, but all right, well, those are the rules.
Yeah. So that's not the case of what's actually happened. Things have not moved based on their pick rates. Things have, because we can tell what their pick rates are. We have HS replay data. Like you just look at it. Giggling Inventor is the second most picked card. And based on the percentage of times it's offered, it's even higher because it's a rare card, which get offered, I think, like slightly less than normal cards right now. I don't know the exact numbers. Other cards that are picked really freaking often, and you know because these are the dominant cards in the arena, and they have not moved at all, include Violet Worm, Stubborn Gastropod, Tar Creeper, Shroom Brewer, right? These are all basically like see these, pick these, right? Like, and if you're playing in the arena for any amount of time, you know you see these cards everywhere. Why? Because they're like misbucketed, right? They're all misbucketed cards. Some slightly misbucketed, some egregiously misbucketed. Either way, not only did the community have enough time to play with these cards already that like it's kind of settled that they're misbucketed and that everyone always picks them, but they also win a lot. The win rates for all these cards are above 87%. Most of them are above are above 57%. Most of these are above 58%. Giggling Inventor is the highest at 58.7%. Give you an idea of how high 58.7% is. I'm gonna compare it to like a card that everybody thinks is good and also misbucketed. Wasp. Giant Wasp is 57.4%. Giggling Inventor is 58.7% win rate. Just for having it in your deck, not even for like seeing the card. People complain about Fungalmancer. Fungalmancer is only 57.9%. That's like almost a full percent below Giggling Inventor. It's like not even close to the effectiveness of a Giggling Inventor. So either by pick rate or by win rates, Giggling Inventor is a top bucket card. There's no possible statistical argument. I don't know Blizzard stats, right? Like, but this is like we have HS replay stats, and that's a huge sample size. Slightly skewed towards like above average players, not even like great players, but like above average players because you have to care enough to track. But still, it's not like Giggling Inventor is like an insanely difficult card to use, right? That was our basis argument for even contacting Blizzard. It's like, look, this is a card that we know 100% exactly what's going to happen because it's such a freaking simple card. And you have like zero reasons to be doing this except to make it super powered. And that's fine in Constructed because Constructed is weird. The Blizzard makes super powered cards in Constructed. They balance things on combos. They know all the decks are going to make before the set is even released. And so they can balance things based on that. And like Giggling Inventor is everywhere, even in Constructed, but Blizzard has determined that that's okay, fine. But in the arena, you have to use the tools that you created to balance the game. And that is buckets right now. Like, why would you not put it in the top bucket? Why would you want Giggling Inventors everywhere? Anyway,
yeah.
The point is, they're not using anything objective to rebucket these cards. Or if they are using objective stuff, they're also on top of it doing weird stuff that are not objective.
Right. And it's certainly not the two things that they've talked about before, right? Like win rate was kind of the first thing that you would think of. that cannot be the case here to justify not moving Giggling Inventor. And then pick rate was the one that they recently talked about. That also cannot be it. Like we said, we don't have their stats, but there is no way that internally, like they look at Giggling Inventor as like, nah, it's just not winning enough. Nah, people just don't like the card enough. But we like, and it would be, I'm not saying okay, but maybe if, you know, Giggling Inventor didn't move and only like 2 cards moved, you'd be like, okay, well, their bar was just extremely high, and I guess they just didn't want to move a lot of stuff. But as you'll see, tons of stuff moved.
Yeah, they rebucketed it, right? They just like looked at their system and they rebucketed it, but either their system has some weird bug in it and no one reviewed it and said, wait, by the way, the number 1 card that should move is Giggling Inventor. So let's like look at it first and see if it's moved to like check our system. Or they actually somehow had a different system that we don't know about, and that system, for whatever reason, decided wrongly, by the way, like just, you know, I guess subjectively, but really objectively, incorrectly, that Giggling Inventor should not move. And I don't know, like, we can only speculate on why Giggling Inventor didn't move, but we do know that how Blizzard tells us, the information that Blizzard tells us they're using to move, that's not the information being used, or at least that's not all the information being used. That's not even like most of the information being used, because all the stuff they told us that are reasons for moving stuff weigh so heavily on the side of Giggling Inventor being moved. And all logic and common sense, and anyone who has played the arena during this period knows very clearly that Giggling Inventor needs to be moved up a few buckets.
Right. This can't even be something that's like, oh, well, you know, this was overlooked, right? I mean, this is the boogeyman in the arena right now. And just to give you a couple, like, guys, an idea of stuff that was moved that you just be like, wait, you thought of that, but you didn't think of Giggling Inventor. Stuff like Spark Drill, right?
The Vorax moved.
The Vorax is the one I was really looking at. I was like, if you like are spending the time and the energy to look at something and be like, no, Spark Drill is problematic enough that we have to move it. The Vorax on Legendary, that really no one cares about. And like, even if it was misbucketed, people would just be like, I really don't care about the Vorax, right? If you're spending the energy and the thought process to be like, yes, this is problematic, it needs to be moved, then I have no idea what they're doing with Giggling.
Yeah, like, it can't be an automated process. If it is, then Giggling would have moved. And it can't be a human being doing stuff, or else they would have, like, beyond failed. Like, we're talking, like, if you are, you know, designated to be the person who does the math on stuff, and you've been trained in math, and you, I don't know, forgot algebra. Like, it's something, like, I don't even know. I can't even make a good example. It's so silly. Maybe not even you forgot algebra. You forgot how to, like, type and write and read. It's like that basic. I don't know. Like, I don't know what's happening at Blizzard. Clearly they didn't care too much about the arena because they didn't, like, move anything for 2 months. But, like, maybe stuff was going on, right? It's August. August is usually, like, a slow kind of thing. Maybe they were tired. Maybe everyone was on vacation. But now that you finally move stuff, this is like as bullshitty of a thing that Blizzard's done to the arena as anything, right? Like, inexplicable, like, it's very easy for you to do the right thing. You know what the right thing is, and you just inexplicably do something else totally different.
Because here's the thing. When Blizzard introduced buckets, we were huge supporters of the general idea, right? But we also recognized, we're just like, okay, look, here's the problem with these buckets, potential problem. And I remember us saying it even back then. We're like, Blizzard is committing themselves to a system that requires upkeep, right? Like constant upkeep. And they will have their thumbs heavily on the scale now. It's not just they like the old drafting system, in which is just like, it's RNG, right? It's like what you get is really RNG. With this system, you have to make sure the buckets are correct. Otherwise, you throw the meta out of whack, right? Like, if it's just RNG drafts, the meta might be like, you know, the meta might be like sort of unsavory in other ways, right? But it won't be because like one card completely takes over the meta, like Giggling Inventor, which can happen in a bucket system, right? And you're introducing that when you like do the bucket system. And so we're just like, okay, well, you know what? We're going to put faith in Blizzard that they are going to correctly upkeep it. And they don't have to be perfect, but they just need to get rid of the egregious things that are seriously impacting the arena. And this is like, oh man, like this was one of the first tests, and I would say the easiest test.
Yeah.
And
like everybody is on board with one thing. It's not even just arena. It's just an overpowered card. Like, there cannot be an easier thing to bucket than Giggling Inventor. They messed it up initially. We were poking at them, like unprecedented for us to poke at them before they released a card. To be like, hey, come on. Like, why? Why would you even like try to put this in like some like medium-ish high bucket? It's clearly the best card, like by far. Like, move this up. And they didn't. Then they released it. Everybody agrees is the best card. Even in Constructed is the best card in every deck. And now they're still like, oh no, we like it in the third bucket. We don't know why. Sure, it'll win all the games, you know, according to all of our stats. Sure, it's getting picked every time according to all of our stats, but that's the bucket it belongs in. Bottom of the third bucket.
All right.
Bottom of the third bucket, by the way, is where they initially bucketed Mecharoo. It's where like, I don't know, Bone Drake is at, Charged Devil Swarm.
Like, good cards. All good, but Giggling Inventor is, like, it shouldn't be going up against those. It should be going up against the Primordial Drake.
Yep.
Right?
Minimum.
Like, not...
Minimum. It's better than a Primordial Drake. Should at least go up against Primordial Drake. Bottom of the first bucket,
right.
It's like bare minimum. Okay. In case you're wondering, like, oh no, Giggling is you know, so big. What about these the card that counters Giggling? What about Mossy Horror, right? Like, clearly with the new like tokeny meta and Giggling Inventor being so high, Mossy Horror does very well, right? It does. Mossy Horror is literally the most picked epic neutral card in the entire game. It has a respectable win rate. Its win rate is not as big as you would think it is. It's only 57.1, right? Like, compare that to Giggling Inventor's 58.7%. That's not because Mossy Horror is not good. It's, well, kind of. It's because people really overrate the effect of Mossy Horror because of confirmation bias, right? Like, you see it swing games either against you or you use it to swing games. It's why stuff like EMP and, like, you know, other hate cards people think are really good, and we've always insisted they're not really good. Black Knight. Like, they're not bad or anything. Like, Mossy Horror especially, right? It's a very flexible card. But between people misusing it by holding onto it for too long, or by being greedy with it, and the fact that it just, like, the swings are really less important to winning the game than you think they are. It has a great, but not absurd win rate. And, you know, we think it's definitely misbucketed. We've always maintained that. Mossy Horror is, let's see where we have it. We have it as a 135, and it's in the bottom of the third bucket along with Giggling Inventor. But a 135 would normally be in like the second bucket, like top of the second bucket. So, you know, we think it should move up. I think everyone thinks it should move up. But like Giggling Inventor, Mossy Horror, the most picked epic neutral card, did not move.
Yeah. Maybe this was their intention. They looked, it's like, in some perverse, twisted logic, because also, guys, Blood Knight did not move as well. Maybe they just thought, it's like, oh, well, this is sort of like the counters, right? It's like, Giggling Inventor, if that doesn't move, but if we don't raise Mossy Horror and Blood Knight, then everything will be okay. Just like how everything is okay right now.
Yeah, this is the best meta.
But
Blizzard's like, instead of going by stats, we're going to put our thumb on the scale and create a meta where the person who giggles the most wins unless the other person kept Mossy. And then we have a very simple rock, paper, scissors meta. And then, you know, skill was reduced and, you know, people, like bad players can win a bit more. And then that'll make everything good. And we're going to do it in this way. Maybe. Right? Like, it's Blizzard. They have weird logic sometimes. But it's definitely not because of the numbers. It's definitely not because of the win rates for any type of players. It's definitely not because of how often they're picked. These cards are not moving. They did not move. I don't know if they will move. and it's absurd. It's just like I don't know, like I don't know what Blizzard's doing. I don't know what's happening. This has been
right. And look, some like one argument that people can make is like, well, wait, ADWCTA and Merps, don't you guys think the meta is good right now? I'm like, it's good.
why
Like
wouldn't you make it
I
better? And it's not good
what
because of the whole Giggling Inventor Mossy interaction. It's good in spite of
right.
that.
It's good because small incremental advantages matter more, right? And that's because a lot of what was good was the patch right before
Yeah.
The
one that's 5 days before the launch of Boomsday. That was what was good.
Yeah. It got rid of like the bonuses, so you didn't have all of these crazy swings. So look, I like the meta. I think it's good, but also fundamentally, just you can't. It's like the whole point of buckets was that there was supposed to be no stupid auto picks, right? Like, you didn't have, so you wouldn't have the Primordial Drake going up against Stone Tusk Boar and I don't know, like Murloc Tidehunter, right? Like just an insane auto pick. Right now, Giggling is not to that degree, but to a very high degree, just an auto pick. And you can't have that in this system. Like, so I don't know.
It's like not balanced. It's bad design. No one's having fun like with it. Like it's just they screwed up, and then they continue to screw up. I don't know if it's just like so not a priority that like one person can keep screwing up and then no one cares, or if they really don't think it's a screw up, if they really mean to. I really have no idea if this is intentional or an oversight. If it's an oversight, I don't know how it can be an oversight because this is clearly like if you look at all the changes, we're not even going to go through all the changes because there's too many that have been like moved half a bucket. It's clearly a mechanical process. It's clearly not like a dude coming up with all this stuff. And I just don't know where Giggling went. Anyway.
Because otherwise, I wouldn't look at Corpse Taker and be like, oh, hey, this needs to move from the bottom of the 6 bucket to the top of the 6 bucket.
Clearly what's important to fun and balance in the arena.
Right. Or, something like Witchwood Imp, right? Like a card that people move, super care about. Right. It's like right now, it's showing that it's moving from the bottom of the 5th bucket to the top of the 6th bucket. Like these are changes in which you're just like, okay, if this is a person, they care a ton about. Like these are changes that we would make, right? Like if you gave us the power to do this, we would make these types. I'm not saying we would make these exact changes that I just said. We would make these types of changes, but then you can't ignore the biggest one, the elephant in the room here, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Also, keep in mind if you're wondering how we know the buckets, it's from Arena Drafts. Arena Drafts and ZD Man from Arena Drafts has been working with us, and that's how we get our buckets. In any case, onto the Lightforge. And just a caveat, he's not fully done with this yet. He's like, he needs to run a couple more, but it's not going to affect anything that's already moving by more than like half a bucket a month. So it's like 100% that Giggling didn't move, 100% that Mossy didn't move. If, in the end, it turns out that actually, what were you talking? What was the example you gave?
What? Witchwood Imp?
Yeah.
Or
like if Witchwood Imp ends up like not actually moving, like once we refine the data, like that's possible. But stuff is moving. There's a lot of this stuff. One more thing to note is that you can help us get more accurate data. Just like use the Arena Drafts overlay, and it'll collect data automatically as you pick. It'll also tell you the Lightforge scores and track your runs. So it's an overall good tool. We use it on our streams. But if you use it, especially during periods when rebucketing first happens, you can help ZD Man gather a lot more data, and that all gets used in the Lightforge tier list. And we release all this information to the public as soon as we like figure it out. So it would be a really big help to the community to use that tool, especially when things are getting rebucketed. Okay. Well, that's I think enough bitching about why Blizzard sucks at rebucketing and what the hell are they doing. Let's move on to what actually moved and how that may affect the arena. Do you want to start off with some of the key players that have moved buckets?
Sure. Let's talk about some of the neutral cards that have changed. These are going to be the highest impact ones, and the ones that will, really change up the way that you draft, and it should change your expectations for your opponents as well. I want to talk about Arcane Dynamo at first, because
Mhm.
this is a big change. So right now, remember what ADWCTA says. This is what we have right now, not finalized, but it looks like Arcane
It's not going to
Dynamo.
move by more than like half a bucket, like the final calculation.
Right. The net change
Yeah.
is pretty much like set. You're right. When you say not by half a bucket, you mean the net change overall. So Arcane Dynamo is moving from the bottom of the first bucket to the top of the third bucket. Huge change.
Hmm.
This is really, really big because Arcane Dynamo was always, almost always, slash always, the weakest of your top bucket pit,
Yeah.
right?
Like we always thought it was
And
slightly misbucketed. Some
it
people
was
thought it
always
was grossly misbucketed, right?
right. Yeah, some people thought it was grossly misbucketed. Some people thought it was only slightly. We took the slightly opinion,
Hmm.
and now, if you look at top of the third bucket, it's a pretty pickable card now. And this is huge effects because the value of Arcane Dynamo on a tier list, that's sort of your net value. Like that doesn't speak to overall effect as well, because Arcane Dynamo in any random game can have a huge astronomical effect. See
Hmm.
Ultimate Infestation, right? Like for Druid, they could get Spreading Plague from it. They could get Ultimate Infestation. Warlocks, maybe they didn't have that like game saving AoE and they Arcane Dynamo into the Twisting Nether, right?
Hmm.
So this is
Shaman
something.
also has
What's up?
Shaman also has a lot of the big 5 mana plus cards that are like game winning or game saving potentially.
Exactly. If they're looking for AoE, they got a pretty good shot at getting Volcano, and if they have the board, then it's Bloodlust or the Stormbringer,
Hmm.
right? Like both are good at closing out the game and like capitalizing on them, just like pumping out a lot of totems, a lot of small minions. So Arcane Dynamo is going to be picked a lot more, and games are going to be a little bit crazier as a result of that.
Yep. And keep in mind when you're picking the card, it's still really really slow. So just know that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, Arcane Dynamo being moved down to, I think it's approximately like I don't complain about this bucket. If you want to move it down one more bucket, totally fine. But yeah, it's a pickable card now. We have Arcane Dynamo for the record in neutral at 113, which means we would normally put a card around 113, not at the top of the third bucket, but more like at the top of the fifth bucket. But there are cards on the top of the third bucket that's like close in value, right, to Arcane Dynamo, and it's such a weird and different card that when you're picking between like Arcane Dynamo, Dark Iron Dwarf, and Firefly, you know what you need if this is towards the end of your draft. Like if you need a Firefly, you're not going to take Arcane Dynamo. If you need Arcane Dynamo, you're not going to take a Firefly. It doesn't matter what the tier list says. And now having it in the top of the third bucket rather than the first bucket means you don't have to give up a super premium card for it. So you will see it, even if it's still a bit over bucketed. Okay, next, just really quickly, this is a cool change. Finally, someone decided that Carnivorous Cube is not a 6 bucket card but a 5th bucket card. Better than a 5th bucket card, guys. But moving in the right direction. I thought this would never change because it's Cube, right? It's been there since the beginning. It hasn't gotten better. Um, it's yeah. I guess people have learned more how to use it as time went on, and maybe some stats have gone up more, or maybe people have just heard like enough refrains of us and other streamers and people going like, "Oh, Cube is horribly misbucketed." They're just picking it more now. Who knows? But either way, that's a good thing to see. Okay. Moving on. Here's an interesting one that I am fully in support of, and people. I'll save the big one for you next. But I want to talk about Fire Plume Phoenix. Fire Plume Phoenix was in the top of the second bucket. It's been in the top of the second bucket for a really long time. We have it rated as a 119, which is very low for the second bucket. Like, really, it's a very low score for the second bucket. It means we rarely pick Fire Plume Phoenix. Sometimes we need a 4-drop, sometimes we need a ping or a little bit of initiative. We'll pick it, right? Sometimes we need an elemental, right? Especially if you're a major shaman, right? It's a much better pick. But overall, like, it's not terribly great of a card. Now, a lot of people disagree with this. I see other streamers pick this card a lot more highly. Chat always tries to pick this card a lot more highly. And we've never really, we haven't changed the score to this card too much over the last, year or so that the cards existed, because it's just kind of like, it's a barely premium card. It's very simple. It does what it does. And Blizzard has finally moved it down from the top 2 buckets to the from the top of the second bucket to the top of the third bucket. Now this is basically where the card belongs. Now you'll see us taking it a lot more often. And I don't know if this means that other people are going to just make it an auto pick or something, but I think it's the right place for the card. I think it's the correct movement to be making. And I really like that Blizzard finally moved this card in that direction. And I don't know if it's because of pick rates. I don't know if it's because of win rates. I think the card's always had a pretty high win rate. Yeah, the card's always had a really high win rate. So maybe it's based on pick rates. Maybe people are just not picking the card as often anymore. Or maybe it's the person at Blizzard that really thought that Giggling Inventor is a third bucket card, and now also thinks Fire Plume should be third. But I don't know. We don't know what Blizzard's doing right now. But I'm in favor of this change, even if I think a lot of people may think this is going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and look, this is one in which even the people who are saying this might be going in the wrong direction, I don't think they would think this is egregious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with a card like this, look, obviously I'm in favor of it. And it's not so what this does is, previously, you guys should know that 4-drops were hard to get generally. It would not be that surprising to get a deck that is lacking in 4-drops. And what Fire Plume did, at least for us a lot, was it was a half desperation pick, right? There were other cards that we, in a vacuum, wanted more, but we're like, look, Fire Plume is still pretty freaking good, and we desperately need something to play with 4 mana. So we picked that. So what this does is it lessens the times in which someone has to do exactly what we did, which is go down in value in order to pick this, right? And I like that. You don't want these.
It's a good card. It's a very basic design card if you think about it, right? And it's
It's
not
very good.
overpowered.
Yeah.
It's just here's a card that deals some damage and has a body, right? This is what Stormpike Commando should have been, right? 4 mana.
Yeah, I just like what this offers and what it does for the draft, because you don't want this sort of you don't want this 4-drop sort of desperation to sort of kind of tank some people's drafts just a little bit in value because of that. So by doing this, I think it'll just help out, because even when you need a 4 and you pick Fire Plume, you're not giving up as much value. And it might not matter in 1 run or 2, but throughout all of the arena, right? We're gonna see sort of decks homogenize in value just a little bit more, and I like that. That's the entire point of this, right? It's to let skill shine through a little bit more, and so I don't I never loved the fact that you could just be 4-drop starved, and then maybe you are faced with this and a card that you really want. So good job by Blizzard here.
Yep. Oh, go.
All right, the big one. So we were talking about Giggling Inventor as the boogeyman, and that if you had to go with a number 2 or even just a 1A, it would be Fungalmancer.
Yeah, so
And
for the record, Fungalmancer is the most picked. We keep saying Giggling Inventor is the second most picked card. Fungalmancer actually is the most picked card in the arena. They're both 5 mana. Fungalmancer is offered a little bit more, so it has an edge there. But I think it gets picked even more often than its offering rate compared to Giggling
people
Inventor.
love Fungalmancer. So Fungalmancer went from the top of the 5th bucket, and it was pretty much an auto pick there, to what is now the top of the 4th bucket. So 1 bucket change. So look, for those of you who complain about both Giggling Inventor and Fungalmancer, maybe you sleep a little bit better at night knowing that Fungalmancer has moved up a little bit. Maybe. I don't know. But this is something that, like, once again, it doesn't make sense, right? It's like, how can Fungalmancer move but not Giggling move? I don't know. But this is moved up into the 4th bucket. It's still a really, really good pick. It was an auto pick before, and now it's still a really, really good pick. So you're still going to see Fungal.
It's still an auto pick.
Okay.
Fungalmancer is a 132 on our list.
Yeah.
The top of the 4th bucket has Dragon Slayer at 132, Eggnapper at 137, but Eggnapper's moved out of that now. They actually moved Eggnapper down, which we'll talk about later. But so what's remaining in the top of the 4th bucket, it's still the highest card by our ratings, and quite significantly over the average. The average is probably like a 120 or like 119 or something like that.
Right.
Like
but
this
the
should
average
be
is
this should be in
higher.
the top of the 3rd bucket. Like that's where this card belongs. Top of the 3rd bucket. Possibly even 2nd bucket. But you know what? Here's the thing that Blizzard does a lot. Oftentimes when they bucket a card like incorrectly, outside of the very first movement, they don't move cards by more than 1 bucket. Like they've actually come out and flat out stated it at some point earlier. That was one of their like philosophies in rebucketing cards. So Fungalmancer has gone through a number of rebuckets and it hasn't been moved significantly. And we've always thought it was a great card and you should pick it, but no one, like the community didn't really pick up and complain about it to this fervor until we got into a token meta, which is where we're currently in right now. And then Fungo started to shine a little bit more, and then everyone's like, oh, this is crazy now. And Blizzard recognizes that, and the win rates and the pick rates all back that up, and so they moved it up 1 spot. It's entirely possible that, like, in another month, it gets moved up again by Blizzard, right? Like, this is not like Giggling Inventor, where we're like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, if you're not moving it now, what the hell is it going to take for you to move it? This is like, they're going to move it up 1, they're going to see they haven't moved it up again, and they're going to move it up again. Like, should they have moved it up just like 2 buckets at least? Yes, they should have, but like it's at least going in the right direction. They're being conservative with it. And you could, like, if you don't really know how the arena works, but you work at Blizzard and you're in charge of these buckets and you have all these numbers, you may be a little conservative, right? Like, you may be like, look, here's a card that's been around for a long time and it's been fine. Now all of a sudden we're in a different meta and it's shaking things up a bit, but we're moving all these buckets around right now. Like, we don't want to move this card to be like super high. Let's like move it a bit and see, and then we'll adjust it more to like, if it really deserves it. Now, if you actually know how the arena works, you would know that moving it up 2 buckets wouldn't even like scratch the surface of like making this card unpickable. But you can understand it, right? Like, no one really knows how much the person actually responsible for moving the buckets really knows about the arena, right? Like,
yeah,
and so like it's at least an understandable move. The Giggling Inventor move, like, I don't even like. There's no possible reason for it. I don't care how little you know about the arena. There's just no possible reason for it to not move at all.
If you play any sort of Hearthstone, I guess outside of the lethal puzzles or something like that, these days, then you know how powerful Giggling. But yeah, and you know what? Because once you talked about all of the bucket 4 top cards, it's funny because it's moving out of the top of the 5th bucket where you actually had other cards with like a good amount of value, right? So that was it was actually a pretty sort of value oriented spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So after Fungalmancer, another card that moved. So we're going over all the cards that moved 1 bucket or more. that means there's a lot. We're talking like 4 times the amount of cards that we're talking about right now that move like half a bucket. And it's probably not going to like make or break stuff. Like Gilnean Royal Guard moved down half a bucket. Wonderful, wonderful move. It was always slightly over bucketed. And it's a very useful card. So it's great to see it get played a little more, right? Like Gluttonous Ooze moved up half a bucket. It was always a little under bucketed. Fine. One thing you'll see that is a theme is all the 3/4s have moved down half a bucket. Like everything from like Augmented Elec to like I don't know, just like all the 3/4s. What else?
The Tanglefur.
I actually don't know about Tanglefur. Probably Tanglefur.
No, Tanglefur moved from the top of the 4th to the bottom of the 4th.
Okay, so Tanglefur moved, and then there's the one that refreshes your hero power.
Yeah, I have to search that one up.
Yeah, I don't have the name off the top of my head, but that one also moved down half a bucket. So all your normal 3/4s are moving down half a bucket. I don't know why. I guess people aren't valuing 3/4s as much. 3/4s are freaking great in this meta. So now they're even more higher value, right? So that's something else that maybe to pay a little bit of attention to and may affect things. Deranged Doctor is moving down half a bucket. It was always like kind of a, oh, I really want to pick this because I need some health, but it's like stupidly over bucketed. Not like stupidly, but like, yeah, somewhat over bucketed. And now it's in a better spot, right? Like there's a lot of these like good small moves. Then there's some moves that I don't really understand. Like Corridor Creeper moved up by half a bucket. From the bottom of the 4th bucket to the top of the 4th bucket. This is like actually a good card. I do remember at some point I checked the win rate of the card. It was actually doing decently. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a like we're actually not interpreting it correctly. I know I haven't drafted this card in forever. So but yeah, and other things just make sense. Like Brainstormer got moved from the bottom of the 6th bucket to the bottom of the 7th bucket. It's like an unpickable card. So I don't know why Blizzard ever thought it was not in the 7th bucket, but it's good that it went there. But a lot of little changes like that, right? So anyway, back to the big changes. And these little changes, again, they have effects on your draft, right? Because they're all cards you would normally take. Like Hoarding Dragon, bottom of the 6th bucket to top of the 6th bucket. Oh, sorry. Okay, so back to the big changes. Hench-Clan Thug moved from the top of the 6th bucket to the top of the 5th bucket. It was always under bucketed for classes that can attack, like especially Rogue, and classes with a lot of weapons. And it was always over bucketed for everyone else. Now it's going to be slightly better, right? Like in terms of bucketing. Because if you're any of the other classes, I don't care if it's in the 6th bucket or the 5th bucket, you're not taking it anyway, right? So it's just a positive move to move these cards up more.
Yeah, but once again, anytime we have movement with something like Hench-Clan Thug, it's like, you need to do it differently by these classes. Otherwise, because right now, if you're a mage, it feels just really bad to get a Hench-Clan Thug at the top of the 5th bucket. Because you can still get some really good cards at the top of the 5th bucket, but you like got a complete dud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a 3-mana 3/3. And if you are Rogue, are you happy to get Hench-Clan Thug at the top of the 5th bucket still? Yeah, that's still a really good card. Like that's a solid pick for you. So once again, this is a change, and it's nice that they're paying attention to the card, but we just really need differentiation for classes in which it's just so obvious that like this neutral card is so much better for 1 or 2 or 3 classes. Okay, let's continue onwards. We got Mecharoo, everyone's favorite little mech 1-drop here. It went from the bottom of the 3rd bucket to the bottom of the 4th bucket. I think it's a good change.
I was taking it in the bottom of the 3rd bucket, so I would love it in the bottom of the 4th bucket.
Yeah, I was taking it as well. And not just in purely aggro decks. I was just taking it in, decks generally. So
like, it was never one of the better cards in the bucket, but it was like pickable.
Yeah.
So now it's very pickable. Like Mecharoo is a card to watch out for. Argent Squire, by the way, if you think that that's a normally bucketed card, that is in the 6th bucket, top of the 6th bucket. So we're getting Mecharoo closer to Argent Squire, which is fair. And now we're moving on to Missile Launcher. This is our card good bad for the day. Missile Launcher was the second highest neutral card in Boomsday. It was in the bottom of the second bucket. It is being moved to the bottom of the third bucket. We rated it at 120. Hasn't moved since we initially rated it somewhere around there. Missile Launcher, if you don't remember, is the 6 mana 4/4 mech that has Magnetic, and at the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all other characters. It's a good, like, initial effect, right, of dealing 1 damage to all other characters. That could be very useful, especially in the token meta that we have right now. So I think you're going to see this a lot more often. I mean, if you've been playing in the past week, you already see it a lot more often. People are picking it now. It's like we talked about Mecharoo being 123 and being moved from bottom of the third to bottom of the fourth. Like, it's still a little over bucketed, even at the bottom of the third bucket. But now it's like sometimes pickable, whereas before it's almost always like you don't want this card unless you have like a very good mech synergy. So the way to play this card is really to use it as if it's a spell that comes with a body, and then the body that remains, you probably want to kill it off. Actually, like, dealing 1 damage to everything at the end of your turn affects your minions too, and so it's not like a positive attribute overall. Like, you got to be smart with it. You're really using it almost as a battle cry when you first play it, and then afterwards that ability, like, try to kill this guy off, and then it's a decent card.
Yeah, you're definitely going to see this card a lot more now, and I played a little bit of Arena like 2 days ago off stream, and this was a card that I actually saw a decent amount. And once again, for a specific game, maybe it won't change anything, but it kind of has to enter your thought process now, right? Your calculations. Because before I was just like, dude, no one takes Missile Launcher. And no one did. No one really took Missile Launcher. It sucked. But at the bottom of the third bucket, especially like bucket 2 is a pretty premium bucket, right? Like, there are some really good cards there. So bottom of the third bucket now, going to see a lot more often, and you might have to play around that sort of neutral 1 damage to your entire board now.
Yep. Past that, Omega stuff got moved up. Everyone's complaining about Omega agents. That got moved up. So one of the things that I think Taro had brought up is that there was some kind of bug that was keeping Omega agents down, and now the bug is gone, and now Omega agent offering rates are spiking. So that may be true, but it did move up a bucket, so it's now competing against slightly better fare. If you notice, we haven't really talked about class cards up until now because there really hasn't been that many class cards that have moved around significantly. Omega Agents was a 152 on our tier list, so it should really be like in the first bucket. They moved it from the 5th to the 4th. That's not really doing it a lot. Omega Defender was also in the bottom of the 5th bucket. It got moved to the top of the 4th bucket, so that got moved like quite significantly actually. And the top of the 4th bucket is where you get stuff like Egg Napper and like Death Speaker and Lone Champion. So Omega Defender being moved up there actually makes it like one of the weaker cards of the top of the 4th bucket. Like, it went from one of the stronger cards in the bottom of the 5th bucket, but then they moved it so much that it's now one of the weaker cards. So you're actually going to see it less often, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Like, this is it seems like Blizzard just had Omega cards in mind, right? Because they moved like those 2 Omega cards, they moved Omega Assembly as well, right? Like, that got moved to the top of the 4th bucket.
Yep.
So they had these in mind. You also have the effect of increasing the rate that you see them as well, which people might not love. But yeah, so all of these move from the 5th bucket to the 4th bucket.
So in case you're wondering, Omega Agent is still auto pick. Omega Assembly is still an auto pick. That hasn't changed. You're gonna, they're in a different bucket now. You're gonna the value gain you get from picking them as an auto pick is slightly lower than it was before. They're still gonna move up in buckets as Blizzard gets more stats. This goes back to what we were saying before with like Blizzard being conservative about moving things if they don't really understand the arena, like Fungalmancer. Like it's the same thing. Like they don't really understand what's happening. They're gonna move it up, a bucket, and then they're gonna see, and then they're gonna move it up another bucket whenever they rebucket again, and we're just gonna have to wait for it. It would be nice if they have a little more confidence in their movements, but knowing how they move things, maybe they have the correct amount of confidence in their own abilities, and they should be conservative. All right, interesting thing that's happened, not a game changer, but Conservative Kalamos got moved from the bottom of the 6th bucket to the bottom of the 7th bucket, correctly recognizing that this card, which used to be a premium card back in Ungoro, is a pretty crappy card now. Okay. So similarly, Swamp Leech got moved from the bottom of the 6th bucket to the bottom of the 7th bucket. It was already a pretty good card for the bottom of the 6th bucket. For the 7th,
picked it a lot.
We picked it a lot, especially for Rogue and Warlock. For 7th bucket, this is like a near auto pick card now in the 7th bucket. If you don't have other auto pick cards to compete with it in. So just a note. I can see why Swamp Leech is being moved down. Like if it gets picked in non-Warlock, non-Rogue, arguably in the 7th bucket, bottom of the 6th, who knows? People may try to like not tempo play it, right? Like, and that'll lower its win rate or whatever. Or people just don't like it. It's not terribly exciting to look at. It's actually kind of disturbing to look at. I think it looks like an uncircumcised penis. That's the only way to describe with teeth. That's the only way to describe how it like.
Or it looks like a leech.
Nope. Nope. I've seen leeches before. It kind of looks like a leech, but that's not the imagery that conjures in my mind. Anyway.
I see that as more of a you problem than a Blizzard problem or a problem for our listeners. Okay. Here's the thing. When you move something from the 6th bucket to the bottom of the 7th bucket, bottom of the 7th bucket is not only for cards that are very low in value by Blizzard standards, it is also just the Forgotten Land. Where if you put in the bottom of the 7th bucket, even if we say you should pick Swamp Leech, it is really good value in there. You are not going to see Swamp Leech that often.
Yeah, the offering rates are very low.
The offering rates are really low, and it is a huge pool. The pool for the bottom of the 7th bucket is really large as well. So
when we say the bottom of the 7th bucket, we just mean the 7th bucket. It seems like Blizzard doesn't have a concept of like the top and second bottom part of the 7th bucket.
So with that change, even if you are bumping like a pretty good card down to like the last bucket, what ends up happening is even if everyone knows to pick it, like the card should go down in appearance rate anyways, because it's kind of just banish. Like if you want to banish a card into the arena, you kind of just put it there and it has to compete with everything, that vast pool. So you will not see Servant of Kalamos that often. I mean, you never did anyways, but you will not see it very often, and you will not see Swamp Leech that often.
Yep, and one more thing banished there is Vicious Scalehide, which, from the time when it was a card, we said this should be in the 7th bucket. And it took them literally 6 months for Blizzard to move Vicious Scalehide to where it belongs. Literally 6 months to move a very obviously 7th bucket card from where they started it in like the 4th bucket or something. It was ridiculously high when it started, I remember, to the 7th bucket. So to give you an idea of how conservative Blizzard moves these cards and how unsure of themselves when it comes to losing their own stats and their own win rates, and how much they like rely on their initial bucketing, which is based off of God knows what, but is very problematic, as we've proven in both times they've tried it. That's what you could expect. A 6-month process to move a card to where it should be, if it's grossly misbucketed. So, Fungalmancer has started its journey. It has moved up by 1 bucket. Well, we'll see how long it takes it to move.
All right. Okay, well, we talked about some bad cards. Let's talk about some good cards now. All right. So, SI7 Agent, a card in which everyone else seems to take it except for me.
I don't take it
It's something
either.
which
It's really freaking high. Like
it's really
it
freaking
was at the
high.
top of the first bucket. That's like
Yep.
premium zone for Rogue. Why would you? And
Look,
Rogue
it's
has very few premium like Rogue gets a huge offering penalty on that bucket.
oh yeah, they almost never get to pick there. So whenever I see SI7, it's going up against like Vilespine. I'm like, yeah, I'm picking that Vilespine.
Yeah.
So it's moving from the top of the first bucket, the best of the best, cream of the crop, to the top of the second bucket. And suddenly SI7 is not only offered a little bit more, but
Mhm.
it's not going up against the world beater cards,
Yeah, it's
right?
going up against Blink Fox, a Venom Weapon, Assassinate. Oh, sorry, a Venom Weapon's moving, so it's not even going up against a Venom Weapon. But yeah, it's going up against some more like backstab, right? Like more
Yeah,
okay cards.
much more pickable now, like significantly more pickable. Now let's talk about the only card that I have seen, or like that we have data for so far, that is moving into the top of the first bucket, and it's Spreading Plague. Spreading Plague used to be at the bottom of the second bucket, and it was a just a really good pick there. Ruined a lot of people's days. And now it is going to be at the top of the first bucket. Also, just a huge change because those druids, which had to pick UI, could also pick Spreading Plague when it came to them for a second bucket pick. And now they had a perfect way to stall, right? It's like, how many times have you lost to Spreading Plague into, some more stall, or like Spreading Plague into like Power of the Wild, and then into UI to just close the game out? So now whenever druids have a top bucket pick, they have to pick their poison, like Spreading Plague or UI. So this should definitely help you guys sleep a little bit better at night who just really hate going up against druids.
So again, this is a place where there's no possible stats that back this up. Spreading Plague was not winning a ridiculous amount of games because for every game in which it screws you over, it's a dead card in someone else's hand in a different game. It was not being picked at a ridiculously high rate for what it was. From on HS replay stats, we know how often it's picked. It's picked relatively normal. In our algorithm, it is not a ridiculously good card. It's kind of like a second bucket card, maybe even a third bucket card in terms of its like overall value. But someone at Blizzard really hated Spreading Plague. Like, this is not an algorithm determined. I don't know what Blizzard's doing there, but this is someone being like, I don't like Spreading Plague, let's put it in the top bucket. It's really weird to see this go in the top bucket.
It's really scary, right?
Yeah.
It's like, here's the thing. If this were a one-off kind of thing, that would be fine. Well, okay, even if Giggling Inventor was the one-off, that would not be fine. But what just gets really uncomfortable is you look at all these changes put together, and you're just like, was this not made by one person or like a small group of people? Was this sort of just like outsourced to, like, was this just outsourced to some, I don't know, like test group or something? Or if this was one person or a small group of people working together, it's like someone or the group really hated Spreading Plague, but then they thought Giggling was fine, but they still cared enough about a card Shallow Gravedigger to change that. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I want to be comforted in a way that I know it's like, oh, this is just one person, or it's like, oh, this is just the algorithm, no one touched it. But as of right now, I cannot make any sense of all of these changes when you look at everything. Like, the Giggling Inventor, you might be able to explain that if it was just a one-off. The Spreading Plague, you can explain that as a one-off because people have quirky tendencies. But when you put all of these together, I'm just like, these don't jive together. Like moving Shallow Gravedigger by half, it's like, who cares enough? But then they really care about Plague. Like, someone was like emotionally scarred by Spreading Plague, right? Which a lot of people are. A lot of people are like they just lose to Spreading Plague and they hate it. But then they're not scarred at all by Giggling Inventor, and they're not looking at the numbers as well. So it just doesn't make sense. And I hate it. And I know you hate it too when stuff just doesn't make sense, right? Like, we can't explain any of this. I have no idea.
Like, this is the arena. This is not, like, this is all math. Like, this is all math. So when there's stuff that doesn't add up, someone who actually knows what's going on in the system, it all sticks out like sore thumbs. Like, it's I don't know. And because the rest of the system, the rest of the bucket system is mostly based on some kind of algorithm, right? That's like how it starts. That's how they were initially bucketed, right? That's how they've been moving stuff. Whenever something like this happens, I remember back when MCT was moved, when Boomsday came out, they made a big deal out of it. They're like, we're moving MCT half a bucket. It should not be moved half a bucket. It should be right where it is. We're moving it half a bucket because people were upset, and they like made a big deal out of it. No one's making a big deal out of spreading plague right now. And no one's making a big deal out of it, and they're moving it. I'm almost certain having nothing to do with stats or pick rates. So okay,
yeah,
like
especially when you're moving something to the top of the first bucket, right? Because you're saying that this is the best of the best, and not only that, top of the first bucket is, especially for Rogue, very rarely offered, right?
wow,
Not
this
only
is Druid.
Oh, yeah, sorry. But like, all right. So the first point, not for oh god, Rogue with spreading plague. Jesus. Yeah. But like you are saying that a card is the best of the best, and like if you're taking it away from the middle buckets, you are going to sort of not only devalue sort of the overall classes deck value, but what you're also doing is just saying like, okay, you just can't have it all because it's so rarely given. If this does something unique, well, you're gonna have to give up something else that's really unique / powerful in order to get that.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, after that, major change. Stoneskin Basilisk moved from the top of the second bucket to the top of the third bucket. If you remember,
huge change. Yeah,
they literally moved it from the top of the third bucket to the top of the second bucket like a few months ago.
Yeah.
Like, it used to be the top of the third bucket. Then it was the top of the second bucket. Now they're moving it back. Like, whatever. They just don't know what to do with this card.
It's fine. And you know what? Maybe people, because the meta has gotten a lot more tokeny,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
So, and it's fine. Look, it's been performing really well for me.
Yeah.
But this is a change that has, I think, a huge impact, but not too many people caring about it.
Yeah, like it's under bucketed no matter what. Like, yeah, I'm taking we're all taking Basilisk whenever it gets offered anyway. We all know the reason why it's that low. It's that low because the win rates don't back it up. Because people like really like are not good at using this card. I don't know. I don't know why they're not good at using this card, but it's been the case since it was released. And yeah, it's just I've given up on it ever being correctly bucketed. Toxologist, bottom of the fourth to bottom of the fifth. Good. It was always over bucketed, and now it's going to be at least pickable more often for the weapon classes, right? Which is a good thing. Volcanosaur finally moves from the top of the fifth bucket to the top of the fourth bucket. Thank you. We've been clamoring for that since the very, very, very freaking beginning of the bucket system, when it was like, for a while, because it was a smaller pool, and Volcanosaur was really like the only not over bucketed large card. It was like just dominating all the metas. Like, it would be everywhere. And in the fifth bucket, it's kind of okay. Like, I didn't really mind where Volcanosaur's been lately, but they've moved it up to the fourth bucket, and now it's going to be seen even less often. Right? Like,
you know why? Because like when they first came out with the buckets, Volcanosaur was the cream of the crop of the fifth bucket, and then all of these really good cards just ended up in the fifth bucket, right?
yeah.
If you listen to a lot of our sort of bucket analysis podcasts, one common theme was always like, you can get a ton of good value in the fifth bucket. Like, that is where if things
all
go your
cards
way,
get misbucketed.
Yeah. Like, if things go your way, that is where you are winning the game. For every top pick that you have, it's like, well, that's nice and everything, but every single time you extract huge value from a fifth bucket pick, like, that's a leg up on someone else who's drafting at the same time, right? Like, if you're picking a Valspine and they're picking a UI, it's like, right, that's nice, but you both are getting premium cards. But if you're picking like the Fungalmancer previously, right, in the 5th bucket, and they're just getting like a meh kind of card, then you got a huge leg up on your opponent. So yeah, Volcanosaur was kind of the OG value 5th bucket pick, and then Blizzard was like, actually, we're just gonna put everything in the 5th bucket. So yeah, now it's in the 4th, and goodbye, Volcanosaur. We appreciated all the value you gave us.
Yep. Voodoo Doll got moved up a bucket. I don't think anyone cares too much, but it was always a good card. Now it's slightly less good of a card. And now we get to the fun part. So those are the ones that moved up by 1 bucket or more. Here's a couple cards that moved in weird ways. Like, I don't know. Like, this is the stuff that you're like, I don't think a human's doing this. Like, I think an algorithm's doing this, or else these wouldn't get moved like this. Weaponized Pinata was in the bottom of the 3rd bucket, which was pretty fine, I thought, like, in terms of bucketing. It got moved up. Its win rate is terrible, by the way, in case anyone's wondering on HS Replay. Like, it's got a pretty bad win rate for its bucket. And it got moved up half a bucket, actually. And that could be because of pick rate, right? I know in chat everyone wants me to pick Weaponized Pinata all the freaking time. It's a fun card, right? It could get picked more often. So I can see why it gets moved up, but definitely not for actual strategic reasons. Before, it was kind of a pickable card, depending on if you need some card advantage or whatever. It's a little less pickable now that it's moved up half a bucket. I still wouldn't say it's a never pick card, but it's interesting that it kind of moved the opposite of way of where I thought it would go. Crystallizer moved up half a bucket. Crystallizer is the 1/3 that like deals 5 damage to you and gives you 5 armor. It has very, 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 very infrequent synergies in a couple classes. Very, very infrequent synergies in a couple classes. It also is, it doesn't matter a lot, but it's unplayable if you have 5 health or less. Compared to Dire Mole, which is just a 1/3. And Dire Mole's a beast too. So in some classes it gets a bonus for that. Dire Mole's still in like the 7th bucket. Crystallizer, which was already in the bottom of the 6th bucket, which was kind of weird why it wouldn't just be in the Dire Mole bucket, got moved up. I got nothing for you.
I don't know. Not sure.
Furious Ettin, which has one of the best win rates in the entire freaking game for a neutral card, by the way. Yes, Furious Ettin was in the top of the 3rd bucket and is now moving down half a bucket to the bottom of the 3rd bucket. So clearly win rates aren't doing a ton of work here. This is like literally one of the highest win rate cards in neutral. And again, it's I don't agree with it moving up or anything like that. Like, we don't have Furious Ettin rated terribly high. It was just a win rate of players thing that was curious. Yeah, we have it at a 115. Like, we would move it down, frankly. Like, we're with Blizzard on this, but it does have a very high win rate. So,
yeah, this is the thing. It's not so much about the change itself, right? I'm fine with the change itself, and like, I'm fine with it. And I also just kind of don't care about this card specifically. But once again, it's another data point that shows like, hey, if you're taking win rate seriously, which, if you're not, that's fine. But it can't be about win rate, right?
Yeah.
Because then Ettin has to at least stay where it is. Like, if it just stayed where it is, you could at least say, oh, well, they overlooked it, right? Or something. But it seems like they actively moved it down. And that can't be based on the win rate, because for some reason it is just insanely high.
Okay. And now we're moving on to the card we all hate, EMP Operative. By the way, EMP Operative, as widely predicted by us and as not so much predicted by a lot of other people, has a terrible win rate. Like, a really terrible win rate. Not just for us, but for just like players in general. Because it's over bucketed like severely, and it's not like
once again, it was all math.
It's all math. Okay.
You predict this.
Yes.
It's math.
This is math.
Although it was a little bit more complicated math, because some people mathed it out in their own way as well, and it ended up being okay, right?
Okay, well, some people have wrong math. Some people have good math. Let's change the description of that. It's still math, right? Like, if you're doing wrong math, like, okay, so it's not like 1 + 1 math, right? It's like a little bit more complicated. You have to know how often it appears, how often your targets are, the size of your targets. A little bit more complicated math, but it's still math. Anyway, it's getting moved up a bucket. I think at this point, there's no defenders of EMP Operative who are like, oh, it should be moved up. I don't think those people exist anymore. They played with the card, they've been in the meta, they know that EMP Operative is over bucketed. It's moving up half a bucket. Again, has no effect on anything because it's the card that should almost never be picked, even if it's in the 7th bucket. But okay, like why?
Blizzard
How?
is choosing to move it up.
Yeah.
Which means they looked at it, they had to give a reason.
By the way, it's not like it's being
up.
picked very often either. It has a pretty low pick rate. So it has a low pick rate, it has a very low win rate, and they're moving it up in buckets.
I don't know. Look, right. So once again, like the same statement I made 10 minutes ago. Now, like basically, these were the cards that we want to talk about, and this is the confusing and kind of scary thing, right? If you put all of these together, I don't understand how you sort of jive all of these changes together. It doesn't make sense, essentially. Like, if it's just Spreading Plague moving up to the top of the first bucket, if it's just Giggling Inventor, or if it's just EMP Operative based on someone who is wrong, it's like, if it's all wrong in one way, okay. But it's like all wrong in different ways.
Yeah.
And not all just wrong in different ways, but same degree. It's to varying degrees or various activity versus inactivity ways. So it's
what
it's
it seems
so
to me
random.
is they have an algorithmic way of doing this. It gets done. Someone reviews the data and then messes with it however they want to. And this person is really bad at playing the arena or at the game, or just like does not know what's going on with the arena. Okay, or like the game period. Like that's the only way that the data that like these changes could be made. I can't think of any other way because there has to be an algorithm involved, or else you don't get that you don't get that granular of changes.
Right. It's like the only people that would change Shallow Gravedigger are us.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. Like people that are like us. Those are the only people who would change that, or like change shield block by half a bucket from the bottom of the 6 to the top of the 6.
Human beings wouldn't do that.
No. Human beings would not care about that. No. But then if this was an algorithm, they would have automatically spit back, you have to change Giggling Inventor, right?
Like super highly. Like one of the top high things that they need you to do if you have an algorithm doing this.
And then a human would have to veto Giggling. Yes. That's the thing. It's like if this human, after the algorithm, was human enough to be so scarred by Spreading Plague to move it to the top of the first, like they also feel as though they need to veto the Giggling events. And once again, look, this is just all hypothetical. Like this is us trying to make sense of something that I honestly don't think can make sense. It's so weird. It's just so weird to me.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll just leave it at that.
All right.
Blizzard
so look,
is weird.
There were more changes as well, right?
A lot more changes. Like I said, we went over like a quarter of the changes at most.
Yes. There are more changes, and I'm sure this is something that ZD Man from Arena Drafts will keep on working on, and people from Reddit as well. You know, they're like crowdsourcing this. We're going to figure all of this out. But these are sort of the big changes that we see right now today, and just trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, once again, if you want to help gather more data, Arena Drafts, go to the website, download the client. It puts the Lightforge scores right up in your draft, and it tracks your runs, and it also gathers all of your draft data so that ZD-Man can use it and give us the stuff. Also, if you're wondering, the Lightforge tier list will be updated to reflect the latest buckets as we know them. I think the update will be live by sometime Monday. You can use Spreading Plague as your test point. If Spreading Plague is in the top of the first bucket, we've hit the update button. All right. that's it for Hearthstone. Let's give one shout out to our sponsor. Normally, the stream is sponsored by our Patreons, patreon.com/grinninggoat. Thank you guys, all the patrons, for all of your support. But this episode of the Lightforge is sponsored by Magic the Gathering Arena. MTG8 is in open beta. Go check it out. That is an order. They're like, we talked about, if you want to hear more of a discussion of like MTG versus Hearthstone or what you can expect, our last podcast had like I want to say like a 20-minute discussion on it, so we won't be hitting over all the same points. But if you have not played Magic the Gathering at all in any form before, you owe it to yourself to play it. It's the OG card game with like attack and health and mana that like works pretty much the way Hearthstone works. It is the game explicitly that the Hearthstone developers copied and then changed, right? Like, learning Magic the Gathering will help you in Hearthstone. It's a much more complicated game than Hearthstone, but even thinking about the decisions of like what Hearthstone did to be different than Magic the Gathering will be very enlightening. If there's someone who likes to figure stuff out, which I'm sure you are because you're listening to the Lightforge. And Magic the Gathering Arena, for those who have played Magic the Gathering but are unsure of this like digital game aspect, it is entirely free to play, but you can buy packs the same way that you can buy packs on Hearthstone. It's you can't say it for a fact because there's no like trading and it's unclear exactly how like everything's going to shake out. But I think the idea is that it's going to be cheaper than Magic the Gathering on paper, because you don't actually get like physical copies of the cards, and it's not like tradable. And that's also why they can make it free to play, right? It's a bit grindy to like get like a full like top level deck on free to play, but it's definitely doable, and that's like an area that Magic the Gathering has never entered before. It's the same great game, a lot of support for limited formats. Like, I think having played Hearthstone for 4 years and having played MTG for many years before that, the one thing we keep talking about, and if you listen to us, we compare stuff to Magic the Gathering all the time. But the one thing that always hugely disappoints us about Hearthstone is their lack of support for limited formats, in the way that the OG game, Magic the Gathering, has been, incredibly supportive of over the years. In fact, most players who play Magic the Gathering play some kind of limited format, not constructed format. So it's definitely like something to check out. It also looks super slick. They have to compete with Hearthstone, so their client. If you play Magic the Gathering online before, like I had before, this is a totally different experience. It's smooth. The turns are great. The stack resolves like in a much neater fashion than I thought was possible. It's still a bit clunky compared to Hearthstone, but that's because there's a lot of things going on everyone's turns, right? But it's definitely doing that in a much better way than Magic the Gathering Online.
Yeah, that's one thing that I noticed. So I watched a lot of other people stream it. I personally haven't played it myself, but I watched a lot of other streamers play MTGA, mostly just because I am not good at the game. Like, I don't really play. So I'm like, oh, well, let's see someone who actually plays the game. Something that I was very pleasantly surprised at is I was kind of expecting it to be really clunky, right? Because if you guys haven't played MTG, you when it is your opponent's turn, you need to stay vigilant. You need to stay involved, not just to make reads or whatever, but because you have multiple points during their turn to respond to whatever they do.
Yeah.
In fact, like most
They're
of the
like,
stuff
I
that
cast a fireball, and you're like, oh, I can counter it, or I can like buff my minion to be like larger than 6 health, so your fireball doesn't kill it. All sorts of stuff.
Right. And so both players have like instants that they can cast. And I was thinking of it because I remember playing, the physical card version, and then you'd have to wait and do all of that. And I'm like, man, it must be really cumbersome online. And it was a lot smoother than I thought it would be. Like, you do have pauses in between, but like, I think it's well worth it, right? Like, because you have a more sort of engaging playstyle, and you have more mind games. You just have more back and forth like that. And I always knew that, oh, that's something that's pretty cool, but I'm like, man, it is going to be super slow and just get bogged down. And I was very pleasantly surprised when it wasn't. It was still very smooth. The pace was still good, because that is one thing that Hearthstone does very well, right? It's like, even though it doesn't have this back and forth, the pace is still very good. It's like, when it's your turn, it's their turn, your turn, their turn. So you have this back and forth pace, and I like the fact that even though the pace is different for MTGA, it still felt good, and that was always something that Hearthstone.
The pacing in terms of like you have to do stuff on opponents' turns and whatever is a bit slower, but the total time you spend in a game is actually quicker. At least from my experience at MTGA, like playing constructed in MTGA versus playing constructed in at least the current Hearthstone meta, it's you spend less time in an MTGA constructed game than a Hearthstone constructed game, even though you are taking like double the amount of turns, essentially, because you're taking a turn on your opponent's like side too. So it's kind of crazy, and part of it is because of how MTG's land system is set up. But we won't get too much into that. But just know that it's a much more involved game, and it's actually quicker to play than Hearthstone in a weird way, even though you will have to be involved in the game a much larger percent of time than a Hearthstone. Like, you don't get to take a turn off in a Magic the Gathering. You don't get to hit end turn and like go do something else. You have to like continuously be in the game. Okay, so that's it from us at the Lightforge. Talk to you guys later at next week's Lightforge. Next week, we're going to preview the Dual Classes Arena and talk a little bit more about buckets in the new meta if more stuff develops in it. But yeah, until next week, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Good luck in the arena.